on today's StoryBeat.
I walk through as the audience is starting to come into the theater. And every night I see kids. These people are so excited to be there and see this show. It means so much to so many people. People are going to a Broadway show. I mean, they've waited months maybe. They've spent God knows what maybe, whatever it is. But every night as I walk to my dressing room, I am reminded of that every night.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Brad Oscar, is a two-time Tony Award nominee for his performances on Broadway as Franz Liebkind in Mel Brooks's The Producers and as Thomas Nostradamus in Something Rotten. Brad has performed in more than 15 shows on Broadway, including being in the original casts of the stage version of Schmigadoon, Mrs. Doubtfire, Big Fish, Aspects of Love, and a show I know a little bit about called Jekyll Hyde. He's performed in Wicked, Nice Work If You Can Get It, The Addams Family, and Spamalot. He's also starred in The Producers in both the West End and Las Vegas productions. National tours in which Brad has performed include The Phantom of the Opera, Young Frankenstein, and, of course, Jekyll Hyde. Off-Broadway, Brad has appeared in Little Shop of Horrors, Broadway Bounty Hunter, Sweeney Todd, and Forbidden Broadway. Stages he's worked on in America include the Arena Stage, the Old Globe, the Jolla Playhouse, the McCarter, Barrington Stage, and more. In film and on TV, you can find Brad on such shows as Ghost Town, The Producers, Smash, The Good Wife, and 3 Law and Orders. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm truly delighted to welcome to StoryBeat the exceptional actor, Brad Oscar. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Happy to be here.
Such a privilege to have you here, especially our little tiny tenuous connection to Jekyll Hyde, which I think is something we'll talk about a little bit as we get down the road here. But let's go back in history first. You've been at this acting game for quite a little bit of time at this point. How old were you when the bug to be on stage first bit you?
No, it bit me quick or at a very early age. And I was exposed to live theater at an early age because my folks loved going to the theater and did some community theater. So it was always sort of a part of my life, cast albums, growing up. So yeah, I got bit really early. I mean, by 7 or 8 years old, I think I'm starting to, form putting on shows and all of that. And, dancing around, of course, to these cast albums, that become like touchstones. We all have our touchstones, if you will, right? Shows that really turned us on, or a sound or something that really drew us to.
Like what shows? What shows were the big ones for you back then?
Well, like a show like MAME, a show like Damn Yankees, and both of which I was able to see it at an early age with, believe it or not, their original Broadway stars. So that means I saw Angela Lansbury do MAME, and I saw Ray Walston and Gwen Verdon do Damn Yankees. Now, God bless, I'm not that old, but what used to happen is these stars would take out their shows on tour over the summer. There was a whole circuit, and they would go around, a certain area in the country or whatever, and mostly these were in the round too, which is so interesting. Anyway, so the summer of, I think it's like 1972-ish. So I'm like 8 years old, and I get to see some of these seminal performances in these seminal shows, these shows that, these are the shows that, shaped my love of American musical theater. And then to have grown up in the 70s, become aware of my love of this, and discover Sondheim, who then over the course of the 70s, just continues to break every rule and create yet new forms of, and get so excited by that. And it just kept cascading. I mean, again, my love of performance, my love of musical theater, and then, as I said, performance, and then the idea of what it meant to then be an actor and start, training, and being very lucky at an early age to have teachers and some classes and stuff that I started to participate in that where I really started, now that I look back, to form my craft, if you will, since I have been able to, and very blessed to make this a profession.
How young were you when you started to take training? Were you still under 10?
Not really. I'm like 12 years old when I do this first summer program at the Jewish Community Center of Greater Washington, outside of DC in Rockville, Maryland. Had an amazing theater department for kids. Up through like when I went to high school, pretty much. So we would, there was a program every summer where we would put on one production. And then during the year, there were, classes. But like, I learned like breathing techniques. I mean, like real classes and real stuff that I would then, my parents would pay a lot of money for me to study at Boston University. I mean, at the age of like 12, 13, and then around 13, I think I started taking voice lessons weekly. I started singing and really, again, honing that. Again, big asterisk here, blessed with a family that, was so supportive and loving and enabled me to be able to do these things.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You are one of the fortunate ones who your parents didn't say to you, what do you think you're doing? Get away from there. You're never going to make any money at that. Instead, they encouraged you. They helped you.
Yeah, I mean, entirely, because they also, of course, had an appreciation for it and their own love of it. So they understood that. Of course, I'm sure they were obviously aware and like thinking, "Oi, here's hoping." We know how tough it can be. They knew enough to know. Everybody sort of does, that the business can be so merciless and blah blah blah. But they were certainly willing to let me go for it.
Where did you go to school? Where did you go to college?
To Boston University.
And what do you think you learned there that has held you in good stead all these years?
That's such a funny, it's so funny because education, theater education, again, I talk about how subjective this business is and how subjective, well, the arts are, right? Anything, anybody can stand in front of a painting and say it's the greatest. It's not, whatever, a piece of theater, a piece of music, whatever. What I loved about BU, and one of the reasons I ended up at Boston University, is because I had done so much musical theater up until then, training-wise and performance-wise. I wanted to go to a school that wasn't musical theater-centric. So even though I did apply and would love to have gotten into Carnegie Mellon, because that was, at the time, man, that was but that was a real triple threat. They really needed you. They wanted you to, you need to sing, dance, act, the whole thing. And so I didn't get into Carnegie Mellon. But I also felt like I wanted to spend the next 4 years, on text and do some Shakespeare and some Chekhov and some all that stuff and get an education as an actor, to be a trained actor, because I always, and to this day, I feel like, musical theater is its own sort of thing. But at the end of the day, if you're not a good actor, if you're not telling the story, if you're not, no matter how good your voice is, no matter how, proficient you are at those skills, at the end of the day, I want to see good acting. I mean, I've seen some amazing musical theater performances, right, where they're not the best singer at all, and it doesn't matter.
Rex Harrison, for example.
Yeah, Tyne Daly in Gypsy. I mean, come on. Just an example of, not as someone we think of as a singer, for God's sake, but anyway. So yeah, and BU was good. I mean, look, there are always going to be teachers you like, teachers not so much, classes and ways of working, techniques that you respond to, and those that you don't. And that's just going to happen throughout. I think your theatrical education, which ideally never ends, because every room you're in is its own, new director, new cast, new people, which should always be, I think, informing you as an artist, so you never stop.
I think the listeners should pay attention to what Brad just said. You never stop learning, even when you're a top-end pro. That is just part of the game, is to continue to learn, correct?
I mean, because if you're not, you're dead. You're not dead, but you're not alive. You're not responding. You're not living in that way. And please, I had finally the real opportunity to work with Jerry Zaks years ago with Doubtfire. God, 6 years ago now, I think it was. But I never really worked with Jerry Zaks up until that. I'd gone into Addams Family on Broadway, and Jerry came in to put us in. But that's not being in a room with a director for 4 or 5 weeks and organically developing a piece of theater. I joked to Jerry. I'm like, geez, I wish that it happened 30 years ago, Jerry. I'd be a much better performer had I worked with you 30 years ago, because Jerry taught me, some very basic, but just being in a room with Jerry was so inspiring to me and exciting that, again, at this point in my career, I could still learn things, think of things in a different way, or
So tell us something that has said to you that really had resonance.
The power of stillness. Jerry has a great eye. Jerry knows timing. Jerry's a great director in general. I mean, when I moved to the city in 1986, Jerry Zaks was the man, and Jerry directed several productions in that next 10-year span that each one I will, resonate still in my mind. So to work with Jerry and to get to be in the, again, was very exciting for me. But the power of stillness, the audience's eye, right? It's not a film where the director tells you where to look, right? So we are everybody on that stage is part of the picture, of the moment, of the beat, whatever you want to call it. And that awareness, and especially with comedy, is like paramount. So I learned, again, how to, it's a lot to sort of try to explain, because it doesn't mean just being still. It doesn't mean it's not always a literal thing.
Well, you're not asleep on stage, but you're paying attention intensely.
Yes. But again, it's so that when you're playing ball, because I always say you're sort of playing ball on stage or ping pong or whatever, but it's going back and forth, right? We're acting, we're responding, we're telling the story, but we're reacting off of each other or whatever it is that is making that moment live. You're always responsible for keeping that ball in the air, right? But you're not necessarily always moving your paddle. You're not necessarily always, but you are active in some way and participating in what is happening in that moment.
If you were moving around all the time, you would be pulling focus, and you can't do that.
Right. So the basic idea of that exactly is so true. But
what is it that you think that you love the most about musicals?
Oh my gosh. I guess it's just an elevated form of storytelling that I've always, again, responded to, because at an early age, I learned that you could sing and you could dance and you could tell a story a certain way, you could express emotion a certain way. And it always just sort of excited me. And it always just sort of, I got a charge out of it. And it shaped my life in so many ways. So I have such a passion. And, a lot of it is very rooted, as I said, in a sort of a traditional form of musical theater storytelling. And it's fascinating to see, of course, what's happened to that in, my a lifetime, which is wild to look back on, having grown up at a time when still the golden age they were still sort of the touchstones and things were still being sort of informed by that. But when we were moving into a whole other, with Sondheim and then the British invasion and then, how pop music, all the ways it transforms, all the ways that it stays alive or whatever. But I just, nothing excites me more when it all adds up. And you have a moment that can only be that true moment when it's brought to life, in song, in that passion, whatever, that elevation.
As I've said to many people many times, when you're a writer for either stage or screen, you can only deal with two senses, sight and sound. You can't have an audience understand what's going on inside of a character's head. And so unless you say it or show it, but in a musical, you can express that internal thing through this wonderful device called a song. And that's what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. Sure. Exactly. That's true. Of course. Yes. I mean, yes. Thank you. That's putting it into exactly, because you can take that exactly. You would not just recite as dialogue, because it wouldn't work. But exactly, you can sing about it.
Well, I think that's what makes it so, to me, it's just the big pizzazz of it. It's all of it makes it very special for me. How long do you think you were at the game of being an actor, and especially in musicals, before you felt like you really were good at it? This is something you really could do. Was it early on, or did it take you a while?
The successes that I had, I put that in quotes, as a younger performer, right? The encouragement I got from teachers, from my parents, of course, from educators as it went along, I certainly felt like I was, let's put it this way, I wasn't questioning it. And, along the way, as I got through, as college was going along, I was like, okay, I'm moving to New York. I knew this is where I wanted to be, in New York City. And I had known pretty much when I was like in high school, because then I started coming to the city and seeing shows a lot with my family and then solo. And so this was always Fantasyland. So I pretty much, that was what I wanted to do. And it all just sort of led this way.
But you had very little doubt along the way. You knew this was what you were going to do.
I knew it's what I wanted to do. I mean, yeah, I knew it's what I really, really wanted to do. And I thought that I could probably play in the pool, but getting in the pool was, of course, going to be the challenge. And then could I, once I was, if that happened, whatever. So, but I also knew, again, because I was surrounded by some people who knew enough to help me and tell me this, I was a young character actor. Well, I was a young character actor. So at the time, I was a young character actor. And that meant, I understood what that meant. It meant that the older I got, the more employable I was probably going to be. The older I got, the more roles were going to present themselves to me. Because I was not necessarily that easy to even, and I'm realizing now, I didn't know who I was as an actor in many ways. I didn't know where I fit in exactly. And I could point to certain roles or what and say, oh, yeah. But I was still finding also my sense of who I think I was as a performer, as an adult. You leave college and for the first time, you are an adult. You are living on your own. You are embarking right on that next part of the journey. And you need to find out, okay, now who am I and what's this all about in a way? And so I gave myself a bit of that freedom. I ended up with a great job right away, like a couple of weeks after I moved here, waiting tables at a fabulous restaurant on 45th in the theater district called Charlie's, which is no longer. They're building some monstrosity now. Finally, they tore it down years ago, and now they're building some monstrosity at 45th and 8th. And
right next to the Imperial, right?
Yeah, right next to the Imperial. There was a row of restaurants. For anyone listening who knows, back in the day, Barrymore's, Pulio's, Charlie's, right across the street from the Golden Theater and what used to be the Royale, and I forget the new names, the Schoenfeld, the this, the that. But anyway, great job because it was a theater hangout for both behind the scenes, a lot of producers, general managers, people like that, but also people in shows, people in the biz. So I got to sort of meet and got to know some people. Also, we got paper all the time, complimentary tickets to shows and previews. They wanted us to see the waiters to see the show because if we liked the show, we might talk it up or whatever. And so I saw a lot of stuff, which was amazing because I maintain to this day, half one's education is seeing, is going and experiencing and again, processing that and letting it inform what you do. But I think going to the theater, especially as an actor, a live theater is paramount and so important. Any kind of theater, all kinds of theater. So I was those first couple of years in New York, and I went on some open calls. I wasn't a member of Equity at the time, so I would just go to open calls, or I would try to get in at the end of the day. Sometimes they would see non-equity actors for Equity stuff, and so I did that. Again, I also let myself be in New York City, living in the city, and enjoying that, and making new friends, and seeing theater, and I didn't feel like I had to make it happen tomorrow. And again, I did not have that pressure from my parents. They were helping me out with my rent. I mean, I was semi-supporting myself, but only semi. But they were, that was a good situation, thank God.
Again, I think that's a great gift that you had there because I'm sure many people that didn't have anything close to that support.
Unquestionably.
And I think if you're a listener out there and you are thinking about going and trying to make a career on stage in New York, then it's not inexpensive to live there. It costs a lot of money, so you have to think that through.
Right, and I'm thinking about it now, and believe me, I think they were splitting my rent with me, but at the time they were sending me. I mean, that was like $350 a month, maybe or whatever. I mean, relatively speaking, it doesn't. At the time, I'm sure it felt like more, but now it's like such a pittance, relatively speaking. No, but unquestionably, I did not have to worry. I mean, I was making okay money, and I probably could have sworn. But anyway, yes.
All right, so you've appeared in so many musical comedies, which is a very specific animal. But you also spent a long time in Jekyll and Hyde, which has comedy in it, but not really. It's really a drama. You are a specialist in comedy. What do you think it is about comedy that you're so good at? How does that happen? Is it just natural, or have you trained for it?
A lot of it, I think, are my early comedic influences, if you will. Certainly my idea of what comedy was. And that starts with, again, it's funny. It also starts with my family. My folks have a great sense of humor, and they had a great group of friends that also had a great sense of humor. So I remember that was something obviously that I picked up on. And then again, being a child of the 70s, growing up my formative years, TV, Norman Lear, all those shows, All in the Family and The Jeffersons and blah, blah, blah. B. Arthur, Maude, and then of course, eventually we'll get to the Golden Girls, but that, my God, I just think B. Arthur is, the masterclass in sort of comedic timing and the music of comedy. There's something about, that's another thing. There's music in comedy. There's, every line is musical in some way. I'm speaking in a certain way, and sometimes I'll go up here, or I'll drop it down here, or I'll play it this way. There are just so many ways of delivering a line. And man, there are some Golden Girls, because I've seen each Golden Girls like 100 times. I swear to God, I just can't. I don't know why. I just keep, and certain things are it's just gold. It's just comedy gold.
It's on that show in particular, as many of those shows were, it was not just the writing, but exquisite timing that those actors had with one another. And I'm guessing that's what you really learned in observing it. And then you've practiced it for a long time, that timing.
Yes. I mean, when you get the opportunity then, right, to have material that you can interpret and play. And I just talked about this recently. I'll never, being in the rehearsal room for the original production of The Producers, with Nathan Lane, Matthew Broderick, Mel Brooks, Tom Meehan, and Susan Stroman. But watching that process and watching Nathan's process and listening to the discussions and bits that would occur, Nathan is a veritable encyclopedia of the history of great comedians, obviously. So his knowledge, his love of that, his youth, his sources of inspiration, he's got such a wealth of that knowledge. And then we all channel it through ourselves. And then Nathan is a singular, unbelievable singular presence and a great actor. And again, that's why I say at the end of the day, no one's funnier than Nathan Lane, but I've seen Nathan over the last 10 years now that he's decided that no more musical theater, which I totally understand. God bless him. So Nathan's, been on text, shall we say, and given some astounding performances. And I am so excited to see him do Death of a Salesman, which will start previews any moment now, because he's such a good actor. But in this case, here's a really good actor, which again, at the end of the day, right, I say it all comes down to like that. You got to have those chops, and you got to be able to really connect and tell a story and be true and find that truth and whatever it is. And then to have the technical artistry of what comedy is, because it's timing and it is music. And those are more technical things. I'm not in the moment every night and just going to, that can vary or whatever. Comedy is music and time. Mel Brooks comedy, God, that show, was so musical.
I was going to say, on top of Nathan Lane, all you had sitting there was Mel Brooks, which is, one of the great comic geniuses of all time. And Tommy Meehan, who also was an incredible comedy genius.
I mean, when you get everybody on the same page like that, it's just, you think it can't miss. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes you get a lot of creatives together and it just doesn't happen. But in this case, it all did.
In that case, you literally captured lightning in a bottle, and it just worked on every level. And it was extraordinary. I saw it on Broadway. It was extraordinary. And then I saw it in LA with Marty Short and Jason
Alexander.
Right, exactly. And that was also a different take on it, but this just as brilliantly fun and wonderful. And of course, based on incredible material to begin with the movie. I asked this question of lots of artists on this show, and I'm just curious, for you, what makes a good role good? Why does it work? What attracts you to it?
That it's there on the page. There's the little cute little saying, if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage or whatever. When you have to work as an actor to make material work, that is always a muddy path. When you have material that is just, it works. It's whatever. It's smart. It's good. It's, these are all subjective things, but you know what I'm saying? When you can then take that and you go from there, you don't have to go back and help the writer make it work by somehow trying to make something funny. I've worked on plenty of pieces. They're not good. They don't They're not funny enough. They're just whatever that is, right? As the actor, we only have so much input or control, obviously, of that, depending on the room, but, or the part of the process or whatever. So you can only do so much. And at the end of the day, I've been involved with many projects where I'm like, well, we all did the best we could. And I'm assuming the writers did too. But guess what? It didn't add up, or it's not going to play, or it's not, or it doesn't succeed, or whatever, blah, blah, blah.
So as another truism, it's, you have to have the writing work. If the writing doesn't work to begin with, it all begins there. My experience has been as a writer that really great actors will take whatever you've given them and plus it. Always. No matter how bad it is, it will get plussed by the actors, even if it doesn't work out wonderfully well. It's still better. That said, if you can write something that, really nails it, then the actors have a much easier time getting to that next part.
Because again, we believe in the material. We believe what we're saying. We believe the moment. We believe whatever. You have to be able to find that truth, I guess. And so when I've been in moments when I'm like, oh, I have a big truthy truth issue, which I like to say. I just have I'm having trouble finding a way to make this true or honest or work because I don't see it. I don't see it either from the actor's point of view, or I don't see it from the story point of view, or I don't see it from the, this landing as a joke point of view, or whatever it might be.
Do you express that to the powers that be?
That is going to be different in every room that you're in. I would say to you, though, that 9 times out of 10, no, because unless it's a collaborative room in a way where they want your input, or you could say, this could be better, or we could, or you find a way in to make it better, or, I have an idea, or, hey, how about, but that depends on the people you're working with, because, we're all we have to be protective of our art, of ourselves to a certain extent. We also want to be collaborative and not take it personally, but, it's a tricky thing. So that's going to sort of depend.
How do you test that? How do you know that room is either open to it or not open to it? What's the test for that?
Oh, gosh.
Is there a test for it?
No, I don't. I mean, exactly. I don't necessarily think there is. I think it's something that you just, or you should have a sense of. And look, with age, honestly, comes a bit of, I can say more or maybe make my feelings known a little more in a way that I can feel comfortable doing and stand behind, because I have done a lot and put to, whatever. It gives me a place of like, I think what I'm saying is worthy or worth being heard. But again, it just sort of depends. And you have to pick your battles too. And you have to realize at the end of the day, it's not about you. You know what I mean? We're all, again, we take it very, it is me up there doing it. It is me at the end of the day, I guess, going out there, of course. But you're part of something that is bigger, that you're part of a collaborative process in a way.
You're all working together to tell a story. And so all those cogs have to work together. They have to mesh together. Otherwise, it will easily fall apart. I mean, that's the part of the problem. And that's the director's job, isn't it? To make that all fit together. It's their vision.
Ideally, yes. Put everybody on the same page. Yes.
So let's talk about performance and how we get there. The first thing that happens before you get to a performance is most people have to go through some kind of an auditioning process. Are you still at this point in your career auditioning for people, or do they cast you?
No, it depends. It depends. Yes, some things have been offered to me, some Broadway shows even, which I'm like, really? But for instance, I'm just finishing 2 amazing years playing the Wizard at Wicked right now. I'm finishing, actually, this is my final week coming up right now. And it's been a wonderful job. And joining a show like this, I had no idea the story we were telling. I really didn't. The resonance of what this show has to say and the power of this 22-and-a-half-year-old show and why it is still there and how it is kept in such extraordinary shape. Again, you talk about the actor's responsibility to complete a whole that obviously is working and has something to say and a story that we're telling. And I'm very impressed of over there as to how it all how they maintain that week after week now and how important it is. and that responsibility that we have because, kids coming to see their first show, gosh. Anyway.
Yeah, it's in the face of 2 blockbuster movies. On top of it, it's still hanging in there huge. The question was about auditioning, which I'm going to take this to the next step there.
Yes, I auditioned for Wicked. This was not a job that was offered to me. I went in a couple of times. But it was something that I was very interested in doing. And I have absolutely no problem auditioning. I mean, there might be certain actors who reach a certain point and they think that for whatever reason or whatever gives them the prerogative to be offer only, God bless you.
Do you know the famous Shelley Winters story about casting?
I don't know if I do.
So there's a famous story about Shelley Winters. It's later in her career, and there's some young casting director that doesn't really know her work, and he insists that he see her to cast her. And so she goes in and she has this big old bag with her, and she's sitting in front of him. And as he's talking to her, she pulls out one Oscar and puts it on his desk. And she pulls out a second Oscar and puts it on his desk. And she says to him, "Some people in this town think I know how to act." That's like a famous story about Shelley Winters. But actors still need to sometimes present themselves to people to see if they fit into the whole. And that's part of the process. What is your philosophy toward auditioning? How do you prepare for it? How do you look at it?
Well, I mean, because I'm going to have the material in advance, it's not like, gone are the day. I mean, most of the days for me having to go in and do a monologue or sing a song of my own choice, that doesn't happen very often, which is fine with me. So, so I get the material. Obviously, if it's new and I don't know it or I haven't, it's a new piece, it's a new song I have to learn or something like that, I just try to find my way in from whatever information I'm given. If you're able to read the whole piece, or obviously you get a breakdown or something like that.
You're trying to take a position, a point of view on that character that you're auditioning for. You're not coming in and trying to just be everything to everyone. You're trying to take a position.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Exactly. You can't be everything. But I mean, who knows what the hell they want? Who knows? The composer is looking for the character to be more this. The director wants him to be like this. And the writer thinks he has to have a little bit of that. So yeah, the best thing I can do is be true to my sense of, okay, again, story, moment, whatever it is that I've learned over the years that I can then, how I'll process the material. You have to make guesses. You have to commit. Now the joy of being in a room, a real live audition, is that I trust that if I do make good choice, if I do just do something real, right, and as whole as it can be, in quotes, whatever, because there's so many variables, and auditions suck anyway, right? Because it's the thing. It's a thing. I've gotten more comfortable, but it's still, I'll get nervous. It depends on who's in the room. Maybe a great director or whatever. That I'm like, oh my God, I'll still, but you got to, you focus and do it. But ideally, what I love is when I finish reading maybe the scene or whatever, and they give you some notes. They give you some adjustments. They say, okay, now try this, or let's now do the scene again. I love that because I think I'm pretty good at trying to incorporate that. I'm pretty good at thinking on my feet in a way that, okay, if it's clear, I can adjust and give you. And then I'm showing you two things. Ideally, I'm giving you more what you want at the end of the day for this character to be, but I'm also showing you that I can work with you, that I want to play, that I want to learn, that I want to, all those things, that I, in the room, am going to be that kind of performer.
Do you think that your ability to adjust that easily is something that you have always had, or is that something you've learned through time and experience?
I tend to think it's something that I've always had, in the way that I feel like I've, always approached material as a young, even as I went along and was learning and stuff and trying to, again, make those connections to make it yours, but still honor the material. And so I feel like that's always been a part of my thought process. So how effective, it was earlier on, I can't say, but I think, I've gotten, pretty, it doesn't freak me out anymore.
Well, of course, but part of it, the wisdom and experience is knowing I'm not going to get cast every single time I audition. And when I do get cast, hopefully you know what you're doing and all those good things. So you've now been cast in a show. At some point you've got cast and they say, you've got this part. And I guess you do a little happy dance for a few minutes, and then you realize you're the dog that caught the car. And now the real work happens. You've got a script from someone. You perhaps get some music, I guess, in a musical. Aside from reading it, which is obviously you need to do, what's the first thing you do after that to develop what you're going to do? How do you start to develop a character and what your intentions will be?
Well, that's going to happen for me on its feet in the room, pretty much. Because up to then, everything's just happening in my head, right? Up to then, or I may vocalize, I may verbalize, I may read it out loud, but you know what I mean. You can't play ball.
Are you learning it uninflected, so you're not trying to put anything on it?
I'm not learning it. I'm not getting, no, I'm not learning. I'm not memorizing it, if that's what you mean. No. Now, unless I have to, there are several instances, like summer stock jobs. Oh my God, I did, when I love to do, when I get to do a play, I love when I get to do text. Because, I like to think I'm a pretty decent actor and can do other than just musical theater, which again requires great acting skill. But anyway, this play called Moonlight and Magnolias, which is about Ben Hecht and Victor Fleming, the director, and David O. Selznick putting together Gone with the Wind. It's a 3-character play. I played O. Selznick. He has monologues that are the length of Cleveland, and so the rehearsal process is very truncated, and then we're going to run at the Cape Playhouse. It was fabulous. And I got to work with the great Dan Butler. Hi, Dan, I love you so much. But anyway, that was something where I had to sit down and get off book before we started rehearsal, because it was going to be so tight that and these monologues, some of these monologues were huge. So that was an exception. I did a summer run of Hairspray. I got off book for Hairspray. It's tricky to do it that way. It's not the way I like to work. It's not organic for me, because my preferred process, and 90% of the time what I get to do is you start rehearsal and you either sit around a table, ideally for the first day or two, and you read through it and you talk through it, and there's a process involved. But every process is going to be different, because every director is going to be, everything is going to be what it's going to be. But ideally, that happens, then you get on your feet and you start to stage it, and with script in hand, so that then my body and my mind, then everything starts working together. The physical, okay, so then I start to put together my physical action with my vocal, if you will, or whatever that is, learning my lines and what that's going to be. And so I find that 9 times out of 10, depending on how long the process is, if that goes on if you're lucky enough to have a 3-4 week rehearsal process, then I naturally get off book, pretty much. It'll sort of happen. I'll still have to study, and I'll still make sure and run lines with my husband and stuff like that and make sure I am. But it'll tend to just happen because of the repetition and the physical, marrying it to the physical. And then with that, during all that technical stuff is happening, then you're discovering ideally you need to get off book to really, right? You need to have scripts out of hand before you can really start giving a full performance.
Are you pretty good at quick memorization, or do you have to really struggle to get it in?
Like, for TV and film, often you get the copy a day or two before, and you have to put 8 pages on tape yourself and everything in the world we live in right now. And I'm not good. I can't memorize. I'm not going to be able to get this copy and memorize it within a day and put it on. I'm not going to, it's just that process doesn't happen for me. So again, usually it just happens during rehearsal, but I wouldn't say that I can't sit, if you hand me a piece of paper and have me read something, a poem, and then say, okay, I'm going to give you, a half hour to memorize this. I guess I probably could, but it wouldn't be my favorite thing to do.
So you have to work at it. You have to work to get the words in there. And it's helpful. You're talking about prior to this, when you were talking about working it out in rehearsal, it's marinating at that point. But sometimes you don't get that marination process.
No, you don't. And, and I've had to do it before, it's just not it's not my favorite way to have to memorize, And even if I have to sit down, even if, we've been through the rehearsal process and I'm like, okay, I'm not really fully off book here. I know certain things, but I don't, then I can sit down and then I can really drill, and then I can get myself, but I have a familiarity at that point with the material.
And in the theater, you're getting that rehearsal opportunity. If you go do TV, notoriously, you get little or no rehearsal.
Exactly. And if I had been, doing more film or TV over the years, that facility, that muscle, I'm sure would be much more active. I mean, think of the soap actors.
I've had the privilege of interviewing a few soap operas on this show, and some of them I don't understand it because they're memorizing like 10 pages of script overnight.
It's remarkable. And, so you develop that muscle. That skill is required for that job, for sure. And then to make it look effortless and not look like you're searching for words or what. I mean, my God, in that amount of time every day, woof.
So what are you looking for in rehearsal, aside from the marination and so on? What do you want from the process, from the director? What do you want? What is your goal, aside from learning blocking and lines and so on? What are you searching for?
I want a positive room. I want everyone to play well together in the sand. I want a collaboration, from everyone there. Because that's sort of, everyone, not just the actors. We're all there trying to do one thing. In a room like that, you're going to have maybe your writers and then assistants and stage managers and assistant stage managers and interns and, people who are all doing stuff ideally to make this process happen and develop, and especially, again, if we're talking putting together a Broadway show, because that's no joke. That's big time, big money, big stuff. And so everybody has to rise to the occasion and be professional and do their job. But if we all do that and do it, then it's going to, it will be a great thing. It will be a positive, but there's a lot of things, needless to say, that can influence that because you have a lot of personalities and it's a very personal, subjective thing, as we've talked about before, so it's trickle down, depending on your director. Your director sets a tone in the room. Your star or stars set a tone in the room. So that also is part of the equation.
Do you have the ability at this point, whether on Broadway or elsewhere, do you have the ability during rehearsals to feel whether the show is going to work or not? Or do you need the audience to tell you?
Yeah, you always ultimately need the audience to tell you. Yes, because especially with comedy, musical comedy, you can fool yourself into thinking something's working or something's funny or, we want it to be good. We want it to work. We're very encouraging usually with each other. Things are developed sometimes in the room because it made everybody else in the room laugh, but it might not be best for the is that the right moment for the character or the story or whatever, but it made everybody laugh, Anyway, there's a lot of stuff that happens. And so ultimately, you can't know until you get it in front of an audience because that's the nature of live theater, that exchange of energy. And then they're going to tell you, how it's playing in that respect. And even though, the producers is a great example. Something Rotten is an even better example, really, is that I had no idea with Something Rotten. The producers, look, it was Mel Brooks, it was Nathan and Matthew, and there was a lot of pedigree. The expectation was that the show was probably going to be good and probably pretty funny and probably not suck, but, no one knew it. We did the invited dress in Chicago and added, 20 minutes onto the show with the laugh. It was, none of us have ever experienced, getting that show in front of a live audience for the first time was ridiculous. And I thought this will never happen again until, 14 years later at the very same St. James Theater, Something Rotten does its invited dress rehearsal. And we finished that number, a musical, in the middle of Act One. And they jumped to their feet. And it was just, anyway. And then that continued for a while. That was a crazy random experience. But so, no, did we think that was going to happen? Of course not. I was worried that number was too meta, too nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Look at us, we weren't making fun of, we were celebrating. I was channeling. It's such a great way to do whatever the hell you want, because as this crazy Thomas Nostradamus, I was seeing the future of what musical theater was going to be. And so all these wonderful random moments, but I didn't know that the audience was going to embrace that number the way they did. Both our community, who'll be the first ones to be like, yeah, really funny. Oh yeah, look, you're making fun of Annie and Evita, and oh, very funny. Not only our community, but then audiences just in general. And so yeah, never knew that was going to happen.
Have you been in a hit show like The Producers or Something Rotten, etc., and for whatever reason during a given performance, it just isn't working? It's not clicking with the audience? Has that happened for you?
Yes. I mean, audiences will vary.
So my question is then, what do you do to try and get them back to you?
You don't do any, no. That's a road to ruin too, I think, to try to then start to cater to, again, because what is that? That has nothing to do with the story we're telling or what we've been doing 8 times a week, or audiences are going to come and go. Audiences are going to be great and bad. Now, when you get spoiled, when they eventually did not stand every night after a musical, when some audiences of the producers were just not as vociferous or whatever, you're like, hey, what's up? What's the matter with you? But really, at the end of the day, we're talking about, a couple thousand people, depending, who come together and give us as performers and doing the show a sense of, oh, they're a good audience. Oh, they're a great audience. Oh, they suck. Oh, this generalization for all these people. And it's like, you know what? It sort of is what it is. It doesn't make it easy all the time, because God knows when you're doing comedy and they're not laughing or they're just tittering, or you used to get a guffaw, it can be debilitating. Believe me.
The key here, correct me if I'm wrong, is you don't really change anything. You just keep doing what you do.
Correct. You can't. I mean, again, that has nothing. Yes, it's an exchange of energy, but if you don't get the energy, then just keep going and power through to the next time. Because you cannot be swayed by it, and you can't. And I say this, and believe me, I've done those shows where I'm like, oh my God, really? But you can't let it piss you off, and you can't let it influence what you're doing.
What are your performance preparations? What do you do and you're doing 8 shows a week. What do you do on a show day? How do you prepare? What do you do before performance?
Each from show to show for me, depending on what those demands of the show are, and what kind of shape I need to be in any particular vocally, if it's a very demanding show, then I obviously take care of myself in a way, or I make sure I'm warming up during the day or whatever. This right now, playing the Wizard, is a lovely, very manageable track 8 times a week. It doesn't bust my ass in that way. The older I get, I joke, less is more. And in some capacity, it's sort of true. I don't mind doing 8 a week. It's tiring. It's a thing. I love it still, but it is. I do have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it as well, in that way, because it is, these handcuffs, these golden handcuffs, if you will, right? I mean, please, I've been so friggin' blessed, and I love it. But that's the way I make a living, is by doing 8 shows a week.
It's still a physical activity. It still takes a toll on you, no matter how much you love it.
So each show is different. And I love, like in a time right now when I don't have to live my life to get through the show 8 times a week. So I can do other things. I can do sometimes double duty, which is always exhausting regardless, but I can do double duty, meaning I can work on another project during the day. We do a lot of readings and workshops of new shows. So there'll be a week-long, 2-week-long, 4-week-long workshops or whatever. And so I'm able to do that more if my 8 times a week job isn't busting my balls. So, yeah.
Well, I would be terribly remiss if I didn't chat with you for a few moments about Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, come on.
Since we both have a connection to it. I know you did the entire run on Broadway, did you not?
Almost. Jekyll was very good to me because the show did have such a lovely run on Broadway. They would give us, not just me, they would give ensemble members a little leave of absences to go do other, short-term projects, which was lovely, and come back to Jekyll, which was amazing, right? So 2 years in a row, I went to play Santa Claus for the Radio City Christmas Spectacular, which at the time was being done also in a lot of cities outside New York. So in the winter of 2000, I leave Jekyll on a leave of absence again to go play Santa Claus in Branson, Missouri. Can't write this, people. David Hasselhoff has just come into Jekyll on Broadway. And I am in Branson, and I hear that the notice has gone up and Jekyll's going to close at the beginning of January. So sadly, I'm not going to be back for the closing, which I was very upset about, having been involved with it for so long. But then I'm in Branson, and I get a call to come audition for the standby for Max Bialystock and the producers, and my life changes. And what eventually happens is I am let out of producers' rehearsal to go and be a part of the final performance of Jekyll. So I did actually appear on stage in the final scene of the final performance on Broadway, which was very special because, again, this had been a part of my life since 94. Frank and Linda came to see us in Forbidden Broadway, this posse of us at Forbidden Broadway in Los Angeles. Loved it, stayed after, were so sweet. And Frank's like, hey, you guys want to sing on my Jekyll and Hyde demo album we're making? So we're like, yeah. So I think just me and Christine Petty ended up doing some ensemble work on the double concept album with Anthony Warlow. And then a couple months later, I get a call. Hey, you want to come do Jekyll and Hyde at the Alley? And where were we?
It was the Alley in Houston.
Oh, the Alley. Alley was the first production, which I was not involved with. But we were going back to Houston. It was Tuts and it was Seattle.
Then it was Tuts. It was the Theater Under the Stars.
And then that turned into a 9-month tour. And then that eventually to Broadway. And again, the weird thing is, you remember most of that tour, the company that did the tour, that all thought we were coming into Broadway with that production, that did not happen. And as the tour is nearing its end, we find out, new director, new concept, maybe new actors. And other than the three of them, Bob Cuccioli, Linda Eder, and Christiane Knoll, that great triumvirate, there was some major recasting. And only myself, who else? Martin Van Turen, Ray McLeod, John Tracy Egan, I guess, a couple of us, ended up in the Broadway company as well. Yeah, no, it provided an enormous amount of work for me. I don't think anybody thought the show was going to run the way it did on Broadway because, we got so slammed. It was so dismissed. It was so summarily dismissed.
You couldn't get really worse reviews and run than that show did. It got terrible reviews. It got a couple of nice thoughts. Larry King gave it a wonderful, blurb, but Ben Brantley in the New York Times absolutely skewered it, and nobody thought it was going to run. But what kept that show alive really were the Jeckies. They were out there in force, and they kept telling people people have to go see that show, and that's really what kept it alive for a long time. That, and I think the music is awfully good. That's what brings it in.
People, please, there's nothing greater than having some longevity now, to be able to look back and to be able to work then with younger performers who, there are people, Jekyll and Hyde is huge to them as a show, again, as a touchstone, as a score, as a way in or whatever it was for them. Jekyll means a lot to a lot of people. And that's the thing about art. It's so easy to be dismissive about something like that has, a popular appeal or whatever. And yet there we were, well outrunning all of the musicals of our season, including the best musical winner, Titanic.
Although Chicago was in that, I think that was the year before, but Chicago is obviously still running on Broadway. So,
well, yes, exactly. But at least that was a revival and not a new musical at the time. But yeah.
I don't know if you know, but Jekyll has just finished this past year its 20th anniversary season in South Korea.
No, really?
Yes, 20 seasons in South Korea.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is amazing. I got to go over and see it a few years ago, and it was extraordinary. It's a really wonderful production. If anybody's in South Korea and gets to see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. How challenging is it for you in a show to continue to repeat performances for years? How do you do that?
You try to listen, and I'm very aware that that's my job. That's my job. I'm very aware. Again, I said, especially like right now, every night, I have a very important job to do. I had no idea the wizard was really who he is and what he stands for. And though it is the antithesis of everything I believe and support and feel, I have to go out there and believe it and make it somehow palatable and tell story. And, And that's a big responsibility. And I love it because rarely does our work line up with literally the moment, having some, you know what I mean? It doesn't often happen that you get to perform on stage nightly and have something to say that resonates so much in what is happening right now in the moment. Happens more in film, But anyway, so I try to, all those things. My responsibility to the show, my responsibility. I have every night when I go to when I walk into the theater, the way the Gershwin is laid out, I take the elevator up because my dressing room is on the 3rd floor. But in order to get to my dressing room, I have to walk around through the lobby. I walk through as the audience is starting to come into the theater. And every night I see kids or someone, these people are so excited to be there and see this show. It means so much to so many people, as any given show on any given night. People are going to a Broadway show. I mean, they've waited months, maybe they've spent God knows what, maybe whatever it is. But every night as I walk to my dressing room, I am reminded of that every night.
And that helps to give you energy, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course. Because it's not, because there should be nothing casual about it. And especially because, and look, I'm lucky. I have something to really sink my teeth into. I have a role. I have 20 minutes of stage time that I get to make the most of. The ensemble is up there 8 times a week, working their asses off, changing costumes every 5 minutes, singing their asses off. They are the demands placed on many Broadway ensembles and musicals. That's the backbone of Broadway. That's the backbone of Wicked. That's truly the soul. I mean, so we all have such responsibility, but theirs is, I think, so more than, I have great respect for this company because I see what they do every night. And I have such great respect and the way the show is kept in shape, as I've said. And that's hard work. That is hard work. But these are professionals and they are at the top of their game, which is why when you come see a Broadway show, that's exactly what you should be seeing. Performers who are at the top of their game, ready to deliver 8 times a week, understanding the responsibility that we have, how lucky we are to have a job on Broadway, for God's sake. I'm not saying there aren't issues and I'm not saying there aren't problems. And I'm not trying to Pollyanna the whole thing up. But at the end of the day, if you want to, why are we all, the big picture, man, the big picture. And so, yeah, I really try not to lose it. And I've been very blessed to be able to continue to do what I love and truly, lay into that passion and have the opportunities, as I've said, to go out and tell these stories and do these things.
Well, the Broadway stage is a very special place, and people that get to perform there, like you, are, you're in a special breed, and it's a great thing. I've been having just the most awesome conversation with Brad Oscar, and we're going to wind the show down a little bit. I'm wondering, in all of these many experiences you've had, are you able to share with us a story that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny?
It's funny. I've been asked this question before, and I guess because so many things happen, right? I mean, because I've been doing this so long and so many shows 8 times a week in that way. And so I don't feel like I have any really good, juicy stories to tell you. I mean, always things happen. It would happen a couple times when I took over the role of Max Bialystock. When we entered the office in Act 2, I don't know why, sometimes mind and body didn't coordinate. And instead, because you didn't have to necessarily turn the doorknob, you could push the door. It was on more of a little ball hinge or something. I don't know. But I'd push the pane of the window, which had just been replaced, of course, because in Act 1 it says Max Bialystock. In Act 2 it says Bialystock and Bloom. So yeah, I would somehow, I don't know why, push, and then boom, out it would come onto the stage. First time, we laughed. Second time I was able to start to at least understand and make a bit of it. So stuff like that obviously is randomly going to happen. I loved something that just stays with me just because it tickled me to death. We would come on stage for Places at the Addams Family, which was one of my favorite moments in the show when the curtain was still down, because that opening set in the graveyard was so beautiful. I could live in the Haunted Mansion at Disney or Monsters Unchained at Universal, which I just went on a couple of weeks ago, which is, I can't even talk. I'll go on for hours if we talk about that. So anyway, the opening design of Addams Family is gorgeous. And it was lit beautifully before the curtain went up or whatever. And we would be chatting and we would get in that pose for the curtains to open as the Addams Family. And BB Newworth, I had a couple months with BB when I came in. And I don't know, we were talking about the Golden Girls of all things and comedy or whatever. And I just said, and she just thought it was the funniest thing she'd ever, I said, I worship the Golden Girls. And I said it just at that moment when the curtains were about to open, again, timing, I guess, or whatever. She thought it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. And then just getting through the rest of the number, clocking her, the whole thing. Moments like that just sort of stick with you and that are silly. And oh my God, the moment that should have gotten me and my fellow swings kicked out of Actors Equity. 1990, my first Broadway show, Aspects of Love, Andrew Lloyd Webber. I'm a swing with 3 other extraordinarily talented performers. The show, again, not terribly well received, opens in April. By Halloween, the audiences are so small-ish at the Broadhurst, which is not a big theater, mind you, but audience is so small that night that they move everyone down to the orchestra from the mezzanine. So the mezzanine is empty. Well, it's Halloween. We have a pumpkin backstage that is lit inside with a candle. We take the pumpkin, we go up to the mezzanine, and during this number in Act 2, toward the end of Act 2, it's a funeral, it's a wake for one of the characters who has passed away. Big number, hand me the wine and the dice. But it's very dark on stage. So, obviously, and even it's always dark in the house. Well, not when there's a lit pumpkin floating back and forth in the mezzanine during the number. We're running back and forth in the mezzanine, so it looks like the pumpkin is floating while they're on stage doing the number, knowing that several of our cast members are clocking. So unprofessional, so horrible. Obviously, we thought this was going to be fine, and nobody on stage was going to be like, by the way, to stage management, in which case I know we would have been written up, and geez Louise. But yeah, I'll forever. But I like to think that on certain Halloweens, if there's a bomb playing at the Broadhurst, that you can still see that pumpkin in the mezzanine.
I love theater stories like that. Last question for you today, Brad. You have shared just a huge amount of advice throughout this whole show for anyone trying to get to do what you get to do. But I'm wondering, do you have a solid piece of advice that you like to give to those who come up to you and they say, I'm trying to get into the theater, or maybe I'm in a little bit trying to get to that next level?
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, see as much theater as you can, as far as, again, an education and honing your craft and all that stuff. And when it comes to then just professionally or the actual business of it all, try just everything, to be seen, I guess, to audition as much as you can and let it just be a thing and let it not be about each particular job necessarily, if you know what I mean, but just to have the experience to get in a room and, get to that point where you're comfortable enough where you're showing as much of who you are. You connect as much as you can. I wish I'd learned earlier in my journey, I guess, to trust myself, my timing, my sense of what works, my approach to character, whatever it is. Because again, we spend so much time wanting to get reaching, wanting the job, wanting to be liked, reaching. That's all outside of yourself. It has nothing to do with what's inside. And at the end of the day, that's all you got, because that's what you're presenting is you and everything that you bring to the table. And so, yeah, I think the more you can embrace that and try to find who that person is, trust that. Then at the end of the day, at least you walk out of the room and say, you know what? I just did the best that I can do. That was my best shot right now, given the information I have, given the whatever the situation is. I did the best that I could do. And that's all you can do, because it is totally subjective. And remember, again, big picture. And life is about a lot of things, family and friends. And, there are other ways I have friends that I grew up with doing shows at the JCC, this posse of teenagers who love putting on shows. I'm the only one who made a career of it. But guess what? One of my dearest friends just closed last weekend in Company. She just got to play Joe. So she's still doing it in a community theater. And at the end of the day, It's the same damn thing. The lights go down, we tell a story, we share an evening together, and, so it happens here on 51st, or it happens in Damascus, Maryland, or wherever it happens, you can feed your soul in that way still. So it can't be, because the be all end all can be tricky, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, what absolutely wonderful advice, because the truth of the matter is, they're not casting you because you aren't you. They're casting you because you are you. And so be the best you can be, right?
Sure. That's easy to say. And you get in the room and you want to please in a way, but it's like, yeah, no, it's okay. They'll come to you.
Much easier said than done. But yes, that's what you have to try to achieve. I think that's tremendous advice. Brad, Oscar, this has just been just a tremendous show today. And I'm so happy that you've joined me and I got a chance to chat with you about all these really great things that have happened for you in your career. And I can't thank you enough for your time, your energy, and really for all this wonderful wisdom.
Thank you, Steve. It was a pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.